Hello, everyone. It's me, Candace, owner of Chubby and Coo's Mid-City Bookshop, here to bring you another author event. As always, I am excited about this author event because there are like dragons and things, which I'm always excited about dragons. So tonight I am talking with Jenn Lyons, who lives in Atlanta, Georgia, with her husband, 3 cats, and a nearly infinite number of opinions on anything from Sumerian mythology to the correct way to make a martini. And I love that start to a bio. It's really cool. Jenn is the author of the Chorus of Dragons fantasy series, which is what we're talking about today. It began with The Ruin of Kings, and today we're talking about the 4th book and the penultimate book in the series, which is called The House of Always. Jenn traces her geek roots all the way back to playing first edition D&D in grade school, and just confirmed that she still plays D&D today, and reading her way from A to Z in the school's library, like me and like most of you, I'm sure. Formerly an art director and a video game producer, she now spends her days writing fantasy, and in 2020, she was nominated for the Astounding Award for Best New Writer for the 2nd time. So welcome, Jenn. Thank you so much for being here to talk to me today.
It is a pleasure to be here. How are you doing this evening?
I am doing pretty well, I guess.
I mean, we live in the age we live in, so it's certainly been interesting to say the least.
It has been interesting. You know, the store's been closed to browsing since March of 2020. Still haven't opened up. So it's definitely been an interesting experience being essentially a warehouse.
Right. Yeah. It is definitely been, I mean, it's been a challenging time, I think, to put it lightly, for books in general.
And how about you? Has your writer life changed at all? Have you been able to be creative?
I mean, 2020 was very much a dumpster fire. And, you know, it's really funny because I felt a huge amount of guilt. My own personal life basically didn't change. I was a hermit before this started, and I just continued to be a hermit. So other than, you know, the logistical difficulties of how do I get groceries or things like that, very little changed, yet creatively, I took such a huge hit psychically, you know, just the pressures of everything that was going on in 2020 were such that it was very difficult to write. And, you know, and of course I felt bad about that because I knew that I was in such a better position compared to so many. You know, I didn't have my kids at home taking up all of my time. I didn't have to, you know, juggle all of these things that a lot of writers did have to deal with. But you know, it is always difficult to compare one's position with someone else in terms of the stresses you're dealing with. So.
Yeah, it's definitely, you can't really compare. But I've heard that from so many people, you know, and it was the same for me. I mean, my life changed in that, you know, the store has been closed and it wasn't before. And so that changed. But for the most part, it's like I go to the bookstore, I come home. I'm an introvert. I mean, I did things, you know, we had board game nights and all this stuff that we couldn't have anymore. But I don't have any kids, so I'm in a similar position where it's like it wasn't terrible for me, like quarantine wasn't like it was for so many people, but I had a hard time reading. Like I couldn't get my mind in that like creative kind of space. It was hard. And I just think it's so interesting that like even though our lives didn't change, like other people's changed so much. But even people whose lives didn't change that much had that sort of block. And it's like, of course we did, because it was terrible. Like the world just sucked.
Yeah, 2020, the year I read nothing but fan fiction. So I just wanted to read very comforting kind of, non-serious, didn't matter to me sort of things.
Yeah.
And so I did.
Same. I'm right there.
Yeah.
I think that's why I watched a lot of brainless TV in 2020 more than anything else.
Yeah.
I could just put it on and not pay attention. That's just
I played so many video games. I played so many, like not even like my normal kind of video game would be sort of action RPG style video games. And I didn't even do that for the most part. Although Baldur's Gate 3 being an exception, but it was mostly like, Minecraft and stuff that was very, okay, I'm gonna build stuff. I'm gonna do, very sort of turn-based strategy games, stuff like that. That was pretty much what my focus was on.
It was the same for me. And I think a lot of people, I mean, Animal Crossing was huge in 2020, and it was one of those just like relaxing sort of build stuff games. And I got super into that. And I mean, I would normally be like, Legend of Zelda, like all these like RPG. And I bought Breath of the Wild, and I actually only just started playing it because I thought I could play. And then it was like, I just couldn't. It's like,
right.
Similarly, it's like, okay, no, I'm gonna go build some stuff in Animal Crossing real quick.
Yeah. I don't want to deal with that. I just want to build interesting houses, or do stuff that's really.
Man, I love The Sims. It's like, I'm just gonna go like build, like you say, like build stuff.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
Compound with my friends where I like wish I was right now.
Yeah, because I think all of us just wanted that sense of stability, right? We didn't want to. We had enough uncertainty going on in our real lives. We didn't really want it outside of that. So, I mean, and it was really funny, right? Because this book, The House of Always, which is about like a dozen people trapped inside a lighthouse, was in part written while we were like during the worst parts of quarantine, right? When we were
I was wondering about that.
Coincidence, by the way. That's just the universe throwing a delightful bit of serendipity in my face. But yeah, no, that wasn't intentional, but it did certainly lend a certain verisimilitude to the entire experience.
Absolutely. Oh my gosh. And can you tell, so for viewers who don't know anything about the series, who have never read it, can you introduce them to The Chorus of Dragons? And then for those who have, tell us about House of Always. And before you do that, I'm just going to let everyone here who is watching know this is the fourth book in the series, so there may be spoilers for earlier books. So just to warn everyone.
Well, so the series kind of revolves around this one young man who originally in the first book he's a street thief who an orphan who kind of dreams of a very classic dream of someday my real parents are going to show up and they're going to sweep me away, and they're going to save me from all of this. And I'm going to find out that I'm like a long lost prince, and the very much the classic. And that happens. Except what he finds out is that that isn't necessarily a good thing. That wealth is no indicator of kindness. His family are in fact terrible. And that he finds himself at the center of a number of these cabals and conspiracies regarding a set of prophecies that claim that he is going to, that he's going to destroy the empire and possibly the world, which he's not super cool with, because the world's where he keeps his stuff. He doesn't want to destroy the world. He doesn't consider himself to be a bad person. it goes from there. And it's also my excuse to write a lot about dragons, because there's a lot of dragons involved in all of this.
They're awesome.
And so the first two books kind of happen simultaneously with each other, with some exceptions, and then book 3 is when the consequences of those first two books kind of really kick into high gear, and a lot of bad stuff starts to happen, where everything really where shit gets real, if you will pardon my language. And then in book 4, everyone has to deal with the consequences of that. So book 4 is really about, usually in fantasy stories, you don't get to see the consequences of what happens. You fight the big bad, and you defeat the boss, and presumably the hero goes off and has a happily ever after. And if they are ever subjected to PTSD or any sort of mental anguish, you don't get to see it. And so I thought, maybe I should flip that around. Maybe I should have a situation where, in order for them to actually get to the point where they can defeat the evil, they first have to deal with these things. So really book 4 is kind of about these people coming together and trying to sort their stuff out before they go and tackle the big bad.
And they're locked together, right?
Yeah. Basically, one of them kind of, this is a little bit of a spoiler, but basically one of them kind of shows up and does the magical equivalent of getting the cars, losers. We're going to, but it turns out that due to some miscalculations, that once they get to where they were taken, they can't leave again. Or more to the point, they run the risk, if they do leave, of actually letting there's a god in a box, so to speak. There's a trapped dark god running through the series, and they realize that there's a risk that if they leave, he gets to leave too. He's just gonna be released. So they have to either deal with him or let him go. And
of course it would be like, not good if this god got out.
yeah, not good. Because this god, it is pretty much going to destroy everything. He's kind of tried before. So
yeah, he certainly has tried. And so this is a 5-book series, right? So This is the second to last book. And did you plot out all 5 books from the beginning, like the whole story arc, or how did you start out?
Yeah. No, I did plot it all out at the beginning. I had a fairly rough, nebulous idea of what I wanted to do, and then when Tor came and said that they wanted to buy the series, they were like, so you have a series outline, right? And I, of course, went, yeah, absolutely. Of course I have a series outline. Let me get right back to you on that. And I wrote out all my notes really quick. And fortunately, that was what they were looking for. They just wanted to make sure that I did, in fact, know what I was planning to do. So truthfully, as I turned in that outline, they loved it. They bought the book and all the series, and almost immediately, based on conversations with the editor, I knew that I was going to be throwing that outline out. Because, she's like, well, what if we do this? I'm like, great. I love it. Absolutely. But it just invalidated everything that I just sent you. But that's fine. That's fine. You got to be open to these sorts of things.
I was wondering how, if you had plotted the whole thing out, how closely the books actually stuck to what you planned.
Well, so the books themselves didn't stick to what I had originally planned, but the ending absolutely does. So I knew what I was shooting for as far as the ending, and the ending is what has been the whole time. So
Is that
just the journey was a little different getting there.
sure? I was just wondering, is the ending what came to you first? Like, is that sort of what was the seed that started this whole story?
Oh gosh, that is unfortunately these books have been kind of percolating for so long that I would have a really difficult time telling you what sparked them. Because unfortunately or fortunately, it's not really a thing where like I have a single idea and that rolls out and becomes a book. It's usually like, it's like more of a weaving process where there's a bunch of different stuff that comes together. But fairly early on in writing book 1, I did know how I wanted book 5 to end. Yeah, so, but like I probably, the seeds of this book have been in process in various ways for probably like a quarter century at this point. So it would be really difficult for me to go, it was this thing right here that, or more the point, I can, like, people have asked me what my inspiration was for this, and I don't think I've ever answered that question the same way twice. And at no point have I been lying. It's just that there's so many different, yes, it was this, and it was also this, and it was also this, and
Sure. Yeah, that's totally fair. I was just wondering, sometimes people have a very definitive, like it was this,
yeah,
and sometimes it's just like, well, I don't know. It's like you're saying, percolating forever. I have no idea. It's just how it's come out.
Right. I mean, ultimately I was like, it would be really cool to write a fantasy series, and I love dragons, so it should probably have dragons in it.
Of course.
And well, I have a favorite D&D character. I should base something around him.
And I was wondering that about D&D, like what was its influence on this? Because
no, it had a pretty strong influence. And like I said, I've said it to other people too. If you don't have to look too hard to see it. It's not, the DNA is pretty obvious, at least to me, that is where that came from.
So of the book, have you written the 5th book yet?
Yeah, I have, actually.
So of the 5 books, which one was the hardest for you to write, and which one was the easiest?
Oh, I would say without a doubt book 4 was the hardest.
Oh, wow, really?
Yeah, absolutely. Book 4 was the hardest, no question whatsoever. I think because it is so much more of a psychological exploration than any of the other books have been. And it was just really getting into what these characters are going through. That was difficult. It was just flat out difficult. And I was doing that in the middle of what I was going through. So I would say probably the easiest book to write was book 3.
So that's cool, because they're both in the middle, right? Like the easiest and the hardest were like back to back in the middle.
Back to back. Because in book 3 is really very much about the consequences of book 1 and 2 kind of slotting into place. So much of that was just, building on foundations that were already there. So it came together very easily in comparison.
That makes sense, because like the setup was already sort of done.
Right.
And then it's just like, here's all the things that happen now. So I can see that. I can, now that you're saying that, it's like, oh yeah, that makes total sense. That it's like the first 2 books are set up because they're told from like, they're sort of 2 different like points of view and 2 different things. And they're, because they're concurrent. And so it makes sense that it's like, this was set up, this is all happened, and now this happens.
Right. You're right. Now, here's the dominoes. We've set all the dominoes up. Now tip. Okay, we're good.
Here we go. Yeah.
And so that domino crash, like 4 is literally picking up those pieces and setting them up again, so that in 5 I can go and
tip it over.
Tip it all over again. Is it okay if I answer a couple questions in the comments? I see a couple
Oh,
of them.
sure. Yeah. Go ahead.
So Alejandro, and I'm seeing some familiar faces from earlier, and hello. Thank you for joining me again. Would you think it's fair to say that Relisfar doesn't have the mentality of a villain? He's just the hero of his own story. No, I think he totally has the mentality of a villain. I think that villains very often don't think they're villains. That's Gadrith. There was a guy in the first book who did think he was a villain, and he's rare. Gadrith and Darzin both kind of knew they were bad guys, and reveled in it in their various ways. And I think they're the exceptions, not the rule. I think most of the time you're going to have people like Relisfar who think that they are making necessary sacrifices for the greater good. They're just willing to sacrifice you for the greater good. They're okay having you make the necessary sacrifice for the greater good, and saying that that's acceptable and a fine cost to pay. I think, unfortunately, villains like Relisfar are too common. Is the problem?
Oh yeah, Thanos was exactly the same, right? Like Thanos, I'm willing to risk like everyone. So
right. And actually, there's
right.
Yeah,
so
that is a very fair comparison. Totally somebody who thinks that it's perfectly acceptable to wipe out large numbers of people, as long as at the end result is humanity's survival.
Yeah.
But I think that's part of what makes Relisfar so dangerous, and part of the reason why I remember when I turned in the manuscript for the second book, which was really the one that first really starts getting into Relisfar's point of view of things. My editor wrote back to me and said, he had better not be the secret hero of this series. He had better not be, you switch it up and it turns out he's actually the hero. I'm like, no. He's just very, very good at defending his position. Yeah,
that's fair. And I think, that's sort of what makes good villains to me, is ones who like have good reasons that they can defend, that they think are good reasons, right, for what they're doing.
Right. Yeah.
Then, it's like, yeah, this is the right thing to do. And the whole time you're like, no, but it's really not. But it's like, yeah, it is. And so, but they can, like you're saying, they can defend it. And it's like, yeah, to me, that's what makes him such a cool villain.
Yeah, I mean, why would you ever do these sorts of things if you couldn't justify it to yourself as being necessary on some level? I just think that's a very, very we as the human species are very, very good at coming up with reasons to justify what we're doing.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Speaking of which, somebody said they realize what my shirt is and they love it. So this is my shirt, and Burr is the same, although I don't know that I would necessarily call him a villain, although he is the villain of Hamilton's story.
But. Oh man, he's done some interesting. He's a delightfully complicated character.
Yeah. Absolutely.
He's done some things that were not good, and he's done some things where we're like, man. I mean, in terms of how he felt women should be treated, and he definitely had some good qualities, and then he had the other qualities.
Yeah, sometimes and had some good qualities, but then sometimes he didn't. So
yeah,
it's interesting, like real people, right, versus villains.
People are multitudes, really, is the thing. Yeah. All right. So we'll need to know, will the last book in the series be the longest one? Please say yes. I can't say yes. Yeah, sorry. I've done a weirdly unintentional job of kind of, we're still in the revision and editing process on book 5. So it is possible that it's possible I could be wrong, but as I'm currently seeing it, I think it's going to be either a little bit shorter than some of the previous books, or it's going to be exactly the same size. And that's just like it's almost been weirdly uncanny. Like Name of All Things came in almost exactly the same word count as The Ruin of Kings, within like 500 words.
Oh, wow.
And Memory of Souls was a little bit longer. I think the longest book actually so far has been House of Always, but even then, it's not by much. So
That's cool that they all sort of ended up similar in length.
Yeah, it's like I said, not intentional at all. It was just a funny thing that happened. How did you originally come up with the idea of two alternating converging timelines in the first book? Dungeons and Dragons. So one of the things that I wanted to play with when I started writing the books was I wanted to play with this idea of an afterlife as a separate, an actual location, and not just sort of a quasi metaphysical concept. You know, in Dungeons and Dragons, you have the outer planes, and the outer planes are treated as actual locations that you can go to and do stuff. And I was really interested in that relationship between an afterlife and the physical world when you have someone, entity, or entities that can control who gets to go, who gets to travel back and forth. So, you know, what does it mean to both society and an economy when death is a commodity that can be controlled and regulated and, you know, used as a has and has not, you know, situation. You know, if you have the right context, if you have enough money, you too can get raised from the dead. And that's a thing that is very present in D&D and never examined in D&D. That if you're willing to just fork over enough cash, you know, you can literally defeat the powers, you know, defeat death.
Yeah.
And you know, what does that mean for inheritance? What does that mean for succession? What does that mean for, you know, all of these things that in society that under normal circumstances are really set up around the idea that you will die. You know, so that was always an interesting thing to me. It wasn't really it wasn't the prime motivator for the story, but it was definitely like a background thing that I wanted to throw in there. So
there's one more where he's wondering if there was originally supposed to be 7. If so, what changed? But is that true?
No, that's not true. Yeah, no, there was never supposed to be 7 books in the series. I'm not sure where you would have heard that. Originally, I had very, very briefly toyed with the idea there would be 4 books in the series. But like, I didn't even tell anybody. I just, when they asked me how many books it wanted to be, I just went, I'm going to make it 5. I kind of plotted that out and realized that 4, in fact, wouldn't be enough to tell the story. And fortunately, Tor just went, oh, okay, cool. Yeah, 5 books.
Awesome. And Christopher has a similar question. I was actually going to ask one of these too about your writing process. I was encouraged to hear that these books have been in process for around 25 years, but I'm wondering how long they took after that, because it seems fast, and anything else about your process, like rewrites. So a little bit about your writing process.
Well, I mean, so when I say they've been in development for 25 years, what I kind of mean is the background was in development for 25 years. You know, like there was a D&D campaign, and there was a LARP, and there was, you know, like all of this sort of building up of background experience that kind of occurred. And then I think I wrote the first version of the book that became The Ruin of Kings like 20 years ago. And I wrote it and said, okay, cool, I've written that, and I put it away. And it stayed put away for quite a long time. And then I got it back out and decided to rewrite it, and did so. And I liked it, but it wasn't quite working for me. And I realized that, I had originally written it just in sort of one big long sequential piece, that started with Kieran was 15 and ends when he's, 20. And I realized that was kind of the wrong way to tell that story. And so that was when I went back and started doing once I realized what the framing device had to be, that this was going to be two people, in jail telling this story back and forth, then kind of everything fell into place as to how that had to work. And the book came together into something much closer to its final format. That's always the problem with the debut novel versus later novels that you work on, is that you have no deadline for that first book. You can noodle away at it for as long as you noodle away at it until you sell it. So, that first book had, years while I was doing other stuff, to kind of evolve and change and do stuff. And then the next books, Tor came to me and said, so we want to release these books 10 months apart. Are you cool with that? And I went, yeah, sure. Which, has been an interesting experience, certainly. I'm very pleased that it has been a thing I've been able to actually accomplish, because I think there would have been a lot of very disappointed people if I had not been able to pull through on that. But definitely it was a little bit of a gamble on Tor's part, certainly. But
yeah, that's quick. 10 months. It's like, that's, especially for the publishing process takes that long. So it's like you have to write these pretty quick, Jen.
Right. Yeah. And that was part of what I think made book 4 so difficult, right? Was that I knew I was on this deadline, but at the same time, the last thing I wanted to do in the universe was write. And just, to say that my mind was, that I was distracted, is a little bit of an understatement. But I think that ultimately that kind of worked for me, that worked to my benefit, in that, there was a lot of emotional strain that comes across in a good way, because they're going through this too. So.
Yeah, I apologize if y'all hear tapping. It is my dog walking around. So just as an FYI, we have pets, and so if you hear like that's my dog.
Get like 20 minutes before this started, one of my cats was like up on my lap and being all up in my face. I'm like, well, at least you're getting it out of the way now.
Right, exactly. Well, now my dog wants to come. Well, I don't know what he's doing.
Well, we want to see. We want to see the dog.
Okay. Well, I don't know if he's gonna let me like pick him up. Come here. No, he keeps running away from me now. So it's like, if he wants to, then he's like, no, I don't. He might eventually.
I was having a Werner Herzog moment. I want to see the baby.
Right. And everyone, and I don't know that he's ever been on a on an event that I've done. So it would be like a treat for everyone to see my dog. But I'm also wondering, so about your world building process as well, because do you have a world building Bible? Did you kind of just like free write it? Like, how did you do all of that? Because it's just this, it's enormous.
Right. Well, I mean, I have a wiki, and I have a lot of notes from previous iterations of things. So a lot of that has changed. Actually, one of the things I've kind of fallen behind on after book 5, after, I get this little bit of a break coming up, I think I'm going to have to go back and like update the Bible, because it's always hilarious, right? You make plans and you write a bunch of stuff down, and then in the process of actually writing the book, sometimes those things will change. so you have a Bible, or I have a Bible that is, got some stuff, and it's not always right. And then I have to go back and update it. Yeah, no, I have a lot of stuff that is kept in my head, and then I have a lot of stuff that is written down so that I can go back and look at it. And then I have a lot of stuff that is physically written down, because I do a lot of writing in a notebook first, just because I think better in terms of plotting and some of those sorts of details when I'm using physical pen to paper rather than computer. So
That's so fair.
I write the book on a computer, but I don't plan the book on a computer, I guess is the way to.
That's fair. It's kind of like how I'm very similar, where I like to write down, like, I don't know, there's something about the act of physically writing down thoughts that, like, I don't know, helps me process them better or something. I like to write my to-do list, for example. It
literally engages a different part of your brain.
Yeah.
So, from a neurological perspective, it is helpful to do it that way.
And especially these days, there's so much screen exhaustion on like Zoom meetings and lives and, like things all the time now, too. And so it's like, okay, I need to like not look at a screen, but I still want to work on things. And so like grab a notebook.
Yeah. I find it's very soothing, and the act of writing is a little bit slower. And so it forces you to slow down and think through things a little bit more. And so very often stuff will come to you that might not have otherwise, just because, you're racing through stuff when you're typing, fingers to keyboard. Yeah, it's, I recommend it.
I have one more process question, because I don't see any other questions in the chat about research, because, you have a lot in this world too. And so I'm wondering like what you researched, or were there any, like, what was like some cool stuff that you found while researching for this?
I mean, it's kind of, I love researching, so it's kind of a nonstop thing. So it sometimes makes it difficult to go, I researched this, and that's not always. I'm trying to, obviously I was reading up on lighthouses for this book for Shadron Gore, and I was doing a bunch of reading on sailing ships and cephalopods. For some reason, can't imagine why I was doing any research on those. As I don't think it's a spoiler when there's a gigantic octopus-like creature on the cover too.
I don't think it is. Yeah, it's super obvious. Yeah.
So I mean, there's kind of, I did do a lot more research. Oh, hey, kitty. That's Ozymandias.
Oh, cool. Cool name.
So I was doing a lot more like specific spot research for the first book. Where I was really like going to see. There was a clipper ship in San Diego that I went to go see because I was trying to get a better idea for scale for ships. And cramped is basically how that comes. It's very, very, very cramped. We don't really process in the modern age how little room there is on these ships. research on fencing and just, all those sorts of things. And I think for book 4, honestly, the most research I did was kind of on trauma. Was really on how we process grief and stress and mental anguish, because I had a dozen people who were all dealing with various kinds of trauma in different ways. If they hadn't had incredibly traumatic things that had happened to them in previous books, they had done incredibly traumatic things. Some of these people are perhaps not nice people. Some of them are nice people, but nonetheless have been through terrible things. So I wanted to be fair to that.
And your cat agrees with you. That was amazing.
That was not Ozymandias, that was Corwin.
Well, Corwin agrees with everything you just said.
Corwin agrees with everything I just said. Yeah, absolutely.
That's awesome. Well, let's talk about your characters a little bit, because we haven't talked about your characters too much, but I'm just wondering, there are a lot of characters, of course, because this is an epic fantasy.
Cast of thousands.
Yeah, so many people. Do you have a character that is your favorite, or that you really enjoy writing, or a character that you really don't enjoy writing, or is it different for each one? Like how?
I mean, there's kind of 4 main characters, and I love them because they're my main characters, and if I didn't love them, I probably shouldn't have done that. But a lot of the others are really fun to write in different ways. I love writing Relosvar. Talon is a lot of fun to write. Talon is so much fun to write. Little gremlin. And other characters will also have their moments. I think probably in this book I had the most difficulty writing. There was a character named Kalindra that people have probably not seen since the first book, because she was one of the assassins, and she kind of goes off, and I don't really explain what happens to her after she leaves. And in book 4, you find out what happens to her, and also spend a lot more time in her head than was ever a case previously. And that had its moments, it was like trying to figure out how she viewed things and where she was coming from in the world. But I try to find what is interesting in all the different characters that I write, because they all have moments. They all have value to how they see things. Sometimes they're the worst, but it is still interesting for me to kind of try to suss out why they are the way they are.
Sure. And what about you? What have you learned about yourself writing this series?
Well, I have learned that I apparently have a capacity for very, very complicated plots that is apparently unusual. So these are things I didn't really think about when I started writing it. I just wrote what I wanted to read. I get a lot of people going, how do you keep all of this straight? And I'm just like, I just do. It's just a thing. And that I apparently read very fast and write very fast. So let's see. There's a couple of other. Be interested to hear about your experience with querying and selling your series. How easy or hard was it? Well, the truth of the matter is, it was extremely difficult right up until it wasn't, which, is unfortunately how these things often work. I was trying to get an agent forever, went through all of the query process, dozens and dozens and dozens of, query submissions to agents, and nothing, and I had basically given up and decided that I wasn't going to keep trying, that there was no point to it. When a friend of mine messaged me with a link to a specific agent and said, "This is your agent, query him right now. Right now. I will wait." And I was like, okay, this is very funny, but she was like, "No, right now." And so I did. And because I knew that nothing was going to come of it and that it was a lost cause, because I was feeling fairly down about the whole thing, I wrote him a query letter that was, we will politely call it honest. It was very honest. It was extremely me in tone, in flavor. I managed to break the fourth wall in a query letter, and he wrote me back immediately. Like within 5 minutes. And we started talking at that point, basically larger and larger requests, until finally he had the whole manuscript. And a couple of weeks later, he said, "Hey, I'd like to call you and talk about it." And I got very excited, and he called me up and said, "I think this could be really good if you rewrite the whole thing." And he proceeded to spell out what he thought was wrong with it. And I listened to his critique. And I mean, you hear horror stories, right? You hear a lot of horror stories about this sort of thing happening, and an author spending all of this time rewriting a book, and then the agent going, "Well, I'm still not feeling it," and walking away. But his critiques really resonated with me as being right. That like he was actually giving me very, very solid critique information on this. And we talked for 4 hours, that first phone call. I was like, he would not have spent 4 hours talking to me if he was not actually serious about this. But he warned me. He's like, I've done this before, and it could take 3 years to finish rewriting all of it. It did not take 3 years, but nonetheless, it did take. I would say it took about 18 months to do. And so 18 months later, he was like, "Okay, I think we're ready." And he signed me. And a week after that, he's like, "Okay, I'm sending out the queries for this." And 2 weeks after that, we'd sold the book. So once it happened, it happened really, really fast. And I understand that part is extremely unusual. I think the average for a debut novel is like 8 months on submission. So, yeah.
Yeah, that is very quick.
Yeah.
How many drafts were you in at that point, if you could remember?
Dude, there's no way to know. There's no way to know. I mean, at that point, I had rewritten the thing a number of times, and it had gone in the drawer a number of times, and it just a lot. We'll just call it a lot.
Yeah. And there's a TV adaptation, right? Is there anything can you talk about that at all, or no?
All I can tell you about it right now is that nothing is happening right now.
That's fair.
I will definitely say that the pandemic didn't help.
Yeah, I'm sure it did.
So there's an awful lot of holding pattern stuff happening right now. So Cross my fingers. Who knows? It's Hollywood. I lived in Southern California for a very long time, and so I am very familiar with the fact that an option doesn't mean anything other than it's been optioned. It doesn't. It's very nice. It's wonderful that it was optioned, but we'll see.
Cool. And yeah, what are you reading? That I always ask this too. Like, do you have any recommendations for us?
Well, I just finished reading. Let's see. I just finished reading Marina Lostetter's "The Helm of Midnight," which was amazing. I loved it.
So good.
Rika Aoki's "Light from Uncommon Stars," amazing. That comes out in the fall. Marina's book is already out. Son of the Storm, Sui Davies Okumbawa, I think. I'm probably getting that name wrong, but really, really good. Highly recommend. I am about to start P. Jelly Clark's newest, but I've not done so yet. But I know it will be fantastic because it is P. Jelly Clark. So,
and if anyone cares, I also really liked Marina Lostetter's book, The Helm of Midnight. I just talked to her not that long ago in a virtual event, and that was really cool. And just had P. Jelly Clark on Tuesday for Master of Jenn. Our book club is actually reading. That's the next book our book club is reading. So I'm really excited to read that one. It's really good. And I'm reading one right now called The Black Tongue Thief. I'm just realizing all these are Tor books, but the Black Tongue Thief by Christopher Buehlman. And it is one of the funniest books I've ever read. And talk about D&D. Like it is I'm like, this is like this. It's like this is a D&D campaign, like a super irreverent D&D campaign is what this book reads like. It's hysterical. I think that comes out later this month. Yeah.
It's been really interesting because there's at this point several generations that have grown up on D&D, and so we're getting like these books. They're from the very beginning, right? You had books that were based off of D&D, and depending on, I think Andre Norton had some. Raymond Feist is, famous for it. There's all kinds of stuff that were not put out by TSR or Wizards of the Coast or any of the actual. They were not IP properties, but nonetheless you could see that they were from D&D campaigns. I believe I don't think it's a D&D based one, but I think the Malazan books were based off of a tabletop role-playing game. So this is a thing. But as this has progressed, what I really enjoy seeing is like there's a whole group of these things that are coming out that have stopped hiding it. Like in any way stopped hiding it. They're just really, really upfront with the fact that these things are that have tabletop elements to them. And I think it's great.
Yeah, it's so interesting to see that, how D&D has become, it was a super, super nerd thing, like a super nerd thing. And now it's so much more like pop culture. Like, it's just really interesting how things have sort of evolved and become more of a part of pop culture versus like the extreme nerd.
Right.
Aspect of it. So it's so interesting to me to just see the evolution of all of that.
Yeah, certainly when I was in middle school, that was the fact that I played D&D was not a point of pride, and was not a thing that was going to earn me brownie points in any way, shape, or form. And now I can talk about it, and everyone's like, "Oh, you play D&D?" It's like, yeah, for 40 years. So.
Yeah, I mean, same in high school, and even in I was in college in the early 2000s, and even high school and college. It was like I didn't want to tell anybody that I played D&D, and that, I guess that was 20 years ago now, but it doesn't seem like it was that long ago. But it's so interesting how quickly that changed, I guess. I agree.
Yeah.
The geek will inherit the earth. I love that, Michael, and I totally agree with you. Okay, so we only have like a couple of minutes left. So can you tell us about what's next for you? Like, what are you working on? What comes after this series?
Well,
You can talk about?
I am still doing revisions and edits on the fifth book, which I almost started to choke back on the title, and then I realized I can talk about the title of it because that information is basically out there at this point. So the fifth book is The Discord of Gods. Yeah, so I'm still, even though I am finished with it, I am still finishing it. I've got a lot of, there's also like a lot of, I do all of the interior artwork in the books. So I draw all the maps and I do all the chapter art and things like that. So I have to go do that. But after all of that is done, then I am going to be starting on my next book, which will probably, well, it will not be set on Omfer, I can tell you that. It probably will be fantasy. If I have anything to say about it, it will include dragons, because I am who I am. But other than that, I haven't really made any firm decisions yet on exactly what it's going to be.
Does that feel freeing a little bit?
It is both wonderful and terrifying.
I can only imagine. Yeah. And so where can folks find you if they want to know more about you, more about your work? I know you have a website.
I have a website. I've actually started updating it again. Apologies for everyone that noticed I hadn't updated it since 2019. Whoops. I am on Twitter as Jenn Lyons Author. I am on Instagram as Jenn Lyons and Tigers. If you do a search on Facebook, I'm on Facebook as well, although I don't do much updating on Facebook. JennLyons.com would be the main website. And then you can also find me on information and all about my books and everything else on Macmillan's Tor site. So
cool. And of course, you can buy books from Chubby and Coos. So we have a website too, chubbyandcoos.com, and there's a big place order button right there. So if you want to order Jenn's book or any book, you can definitely order through us, and hopefully you do, so that we can keep doing these events, because they're super fun, and I love talking to various authors like Jenn about different things, especially sci-fi fantasy, because if you haven't discovered from this, I'm a big old nerd, so this has been so much fun.
Which is great.
And and something, in case any of you are watching, Jenn and I are both Joco cruisers. And so I think that is always something cool to bring up as well, and super fun. And I did want to show everyone the book cover, just in case you haven't seen it. This is for The House of Always, and these book covers are so cool. I love that there's like a different sort of animal-ish on each one.
We didn't get a really chance to talk about it, but yeah, no, there's definitely like each cover has something specific, an animal or monster that is important to the book. So
yeah, monsters, that's better than animal. Like, it's much more specific. Monsters on the covers are super cool. And I love how consistent, I guess, like they go really well together, like all of your books.
Well, Lars Grant West has done all of the covers. He's the artist who's done all the covers, and he's amazing. So he's fabulous, and I can't wait to show everybody the cover for book 5. It is so good. Yeah, they've done a fabulous job with the covers.
I can't wait to see the cover for book 5.
And Christopher, I am more than happy to stand as proof that there's no such thing as starting too late. Because if
you're still alive, you got time.
Yeah, exactly.
That's what I always say, because I get that question a lot too from writers who are like, oh, it's too late for me to write. And it's like, nah, it's never too late. You know, Samuel L. Jackson did his first, the first thing he's like well known for, he didn't do until he was like in his 60s. So, you know, just
yeah, I think about that a lot. You know, it's like, well, what if I'd started my writing career in my 30s? And I'm like, well, if I'd started my writing career in my 30s, I wouldn't have one because I wasn't ready.
Yeah.
You know, so it happened as soon as it could happen, really.
Yeah, just keep going. Encouragement. And thank you, Jenn, for talking with me. This was a really fun conversation. Thank you, everyone, for watching and being so interactive. This was I always love having an interactive viewing audience. So thank you very much for all of your questions and comments.
It's a pleasure being here. Thank you for having me.
And oh, look, Michael says he started writing at 48 like Bram Stoker. So it's, you know, it's definitely never too late. And thank y'all for watching now or later. One more plug, buy books from us, Tubby and Coos, at tubbyandcoos.com. And we will see y'all next time. Thank you so much for watching. And thanks again to Jenn. Bye, y'all.